Well, good evening. Welcome to our midweek Bible study. We're going to be in Ecclesiastes chapter 4. We're going to be looking at verses 1 through 8. So if you want to open up your Bible and go there, I did, if you got a handout, they're there. If you're online, I've done a little tweaking trying to make the video a little better. So if you've been watching this for a while and you've seen it before, if you could drop in the comments, or if you're on, you can shoot it so I can kind of know if these are getting better or worse. I won't know until later, but I'd like to be able to get your perspective and see, trying to make the best video we can, best quality. Before we get started, let's go ahead and have a word of prayer. Our most merciful and loving Father, again, we come at this time in our lives to study your word, to glorify you. We are thankful for the word that you have blessed us with, that we can study from it and become wiser and stronger in our faith, learning more about your love, your grace, your mercy, and also the way that we can have our sins forgiven and how we can stay in a right relationship with you. We ask this in Christ's name, amen. So the book of Ecclesiastes, as we started out at the beginning, we looked at the idea, some key words to keep in mind is when he talks about under the sun, he's talking about the physical world, the life in which we're biologically living in, not outside into the eternal time. And so that's under the sun is something physical. When he says vanity, when you simplify that and kind of look at the basic Hebrew meaning, it's like a vapor. Very similar to what James says when he says, that life is like a vapor. And what's a vapor? It just, and you can't grasp it, can you? And that's another phrase he uses a lot of. He says, like grasping after the wind. And so while we're living this life, we're going after this vapor. That's something, and we're trying to grasp at something. And that's going to happen. And so as he starts this out, he says, I'm setting out on a journey. I'm going to go through and try to find, what is the purpose of man and the journey that we live under the sun in this world. And how can I find contentment? How can I find satisfaction and pleasure and joy and all these things? And so he does. He goes after pursuing pleasures, wisdom and folly, and then looking at kind of careers. He's looking at everything that we experience ourselves today as we're living this life. And he comes to the conclusion that basically it's all vanity of vanities. It's like grasping after the wind. And remember, vanity is, it's quick. It's like, when he pointed out the idea of like with pleasure, pleasure of eating food, pleasure of hobbies, pleasure of your job, pleasure, whatever you're getting pleasure out of, that it's empty. It leaves you momentarily satisfied, but then it leaves you empty. And then you got to do it again, and then leaves you empty. And then you got to do it again. And you keep searching and questing after that dopamine fix that will stay there, right? Like addiction, whether it's addicted to chocolate, drugs, alcohol, hobbies, everything has, and there's a neurochemical that's released in our body, dopamine, that gives us that feeling of goodness. It feels good. And that's what we want. And that's what we journey through this world under the sun in this quest for contentment and peace. And when he says these things, and it sounds very depressing, everything he's saying is in relationship to you and God. When you're living on this world without God, that's what he's talking about. Everything that we're going after is like grasping after the wind. If it isn't with God, you're always going to be let down. And the only thing you have is the quest for that pleasurable feeling again, that quest for satisfaction again. And that's all you got. And like he pointed out, in each one of these things, he's determined that they all end in the same place. Where? The grave. The grave. He said, I saw the rich man, and I saw the fool and the wise man. And they all went to where? The grave. And so when he then goes through there in 3, and he talks about the times and seasons. For everything, there is a time and a season. Birth, death, war, peace, gathering, scattering, sowing, tearing. All those things are things that evolve around time. Everything under the sun is constrained by time. The grave will end that. And then you'll go on into the next dimension. And that one has no time, because that's where God dwells. God does not dwell in time. Eternity is not timed. Time only began because God created things. And when God created things, then the moment that it started, what we talked about at the beginning of creation, anything that's new, just like your car, just like your clothes, everything from the time when it's initially created, it starts to decay. And that's the limitation because of the material world under the sun, and time restricts it. Time is set that way. That's why outside, above the sun, is where we should be focused. And so as he goes through that, so he's done this, various lifestyles, pursuing after that satisfaction, all these things. And you can't find it. And he very clearly said, if they're without God, they're meaningless. But God has allowed us. So don't get too depressed. Don't get too like, oh man, I can't have fun. I can't, have pleasure and enjoyment and satisfaction. No. It's just when it's without God, it will always leave you wanting. And that's all you're living around. And it's constantly going to depress you and then get you high, and depress you and get you high. And you're on that. And so you're in balance. You're not right. God has put that vacuum in us that we should seek him. And that's what we looked at in Charles Swindoll's book last week when he was talking about God has basically kind of created within us this desire, this creative part of us that we know better. Paul talks about that in Romans 1 when he said that all men are without excuse. because God has put it in creation that you know there's a creator. You can call him what you want. You can call him Yahweh, you can call him Elohim, you can call him God, but you know there's a creator. And so that's something that God has put within us. And if we find it with God, then all those things in the journey in this world, time doesn't stop us. We're not hanging our true pleasure on those things under the sun. Now, the next phase as he comes into this is looking at the idea of kind of like, sometimes I've kind of heard it sometimes like, you're searching after, you want to get something, and somebody goes, "Are you sure you know what you're asking for? You really want that?" I hear young people all the time saying, "Well, I want to be the president of the United States. Are you sure you know we want that? I want to be a rock star. Are you sure?" "Well, yeah, that's where I want to go." Well, what's it like on the top? When we get behind the scenes on the life of what the different people who are in those positions, it changes it. When you first start a job, you start out as a guy that's out there, like I was, shoveling manure in a horse pen, and I'd look at my boss and go, "I want his job. And I don't want to stop shoveling manure, and I'll have somebody under me that's doing the manure shoveling, and I'll be the guy driving around in the Ford pickup truck and telling everybody, throw the hay over here and do this over here," right? But then when I started thinking about it as I got older and looked back at what Don went through, I'm like, I don't know. So tonight's looking at the idea of what the view is from the top. And when you consider Solomon, you think about that, we'll look at that. So now we're talking about when you get it, what do you have? Is it really what you thought? Right? So this is kind of the angle. Referencing back to that book, Charles Swindoll, he has a section called The Lonely Whine of the Top Dog. The Lonely Whine of a Top Dog. I'm going to read it. "We have been inundated with books, seminars, courses, and speeches on the subject of top-level management and success-oriented leadership. The hype has never been greater, nor the lure more effective. Indeed, we have largely been convinced that the achievement of an impressive position brings lasting satisfaction and a liberating sense of pleasure. But for the executive, the proverbial pot of gold at the end of the rainbow is not what it appears to be. More often than not, managers have head-on collisions with intense pressures, political rivalry, economic anxiety, and inescapable loneliness. Centuries ago, King Solomon addressed the emptiness of those who make it to the top of their profession. His words live on today. They can make a difference in our lives if we will hear them well and heed them their cry. So when we consider Solomon and we look at his background, his dad was David, King David. His mother was Bathsheba. And we know a lot of the drama behind, Bathsheba and David, his father and his mother, and how he had an older sibling that was basically killed because of judgment that was brought upon his father and his mother for the adulterous relationship they had. He has multiple brothers. He has a lot of brothers. But David had promised that Solomon would inherit the kingdom. But he's not the oldest. He was not the oldest. And so as David is old and pretty much constrained to his bed and failing in life, a power struggle ensued. And the brothers start jockeying around for that position. Because it was only the word given to Bathsheba. But the prophet Nathan, the same prophet, by the way, who came and delivered a judgment on Bathsheba and David, knows that it's Solomon. But the brothers are going to do their power play. If they can undermine him before and be sworn in as king before Solomon, then they've got the power, and then they can execute anything they do. And normally, what do? When somebody comes into power, you got to get rid of everybody that's going to be trying to get rid of you. So there's a purge. Sometimes that purge is exile, and sometimes a lot of times that purge is execution. But you can't keep a sibling around. We've seen that in the movies, right? If you just watch some of the movies of the old inherited kings and stuff, the brother becomes king and he kills his other brothers. Why? Because his brother's going to try to kill him so he can become king. So we have this type of a background power play that has Solomon, and he's a very young man, possibly only 18 to 20 years of age. And he's got some older siblings, wiser, probably into their 40s. And they've got connections. And so they can make promises, and they probably have a better job at wheeling and dealing and saying, hey, when the old man's gone, David's gone, you know what? I'm going to be king, and I'll put you in charge of security. I'll put you as the Secretary of Defense. I'll put you in. So, and then there's this poor little Solomon, So what I'm getting at is to understand how Solomon came about and started. It's important because now he, as he's writing this book, now he's at the top and he's looking down. It was a tragic kind of power shift because one of his brothers did come close to taking on power, and he declares himself king. And it was an emergency situation where finally Nathan and Bathsheba go into David and have David redeclare it and then anoint him. And that same brother, he ends up having to have executed. And he has another brother that does kind of that thing. So he knew what it was like. And he got baptized, as we would say, by fire, got thrown into it. And so all these years, as he's lived this life and ruling, he has been able to witness it as he came into power. We've seen this with young rulers or young people who are in positions of power. There's people all around you trying to manipulate you. Hey, you ought to do this. I mean, we can go to Jeroboam the first, whenever the kingdom was divided when Solomon dies. And Rehoboam, his own son, instead of listening to his father's advisors, he listens to somebody else, and he does what? He ends up splitting the kingdom apart. So all of this stuff Solomon lived through, and so now he's looking at, so the first thing he sees as he comes and he starts to look down is this universal oppression. There's this universal oppression. Now, last week we kind of ended a little bit of overlap on this because one of the other observations that Solomon had seen was that as he looked around this world, there's no real true justice. It's superficial, it's inadequate, and many times it's just not there. In other words, there's judges who are not giving proper verdicts, they're not carrying out. Certain people in power who should be providing care for others are withholding or they're taxing. And so this is the type of thing that, as he sees this type of injustice that's around. And so he sees as well, looking at from the top down. Now he starts to list three things we're going to look at, and it's oppression. This type of oppressionness. And those things oppress, those things that I just discussed. So that's why I say these kind of overlap. And so starting in verse 1 of 4, he says, "Then I looked again at all the acts of oppression that were being done under the sun. And behold, I saw the tears of the oppressed, and that they had no one to comfort them. And on the side of the oppressors was power, but they had no one to comfort them." He doesn't really go into great detail about the type of oppressions that were occurring, but they were probably exactly what I just described, those things. And the word oppression means to press against, to press upon. Anytime you put pressure on something, it's not the normal environment. So, for example, you understand, you jump into a swimming pool, you go down below 12 feet, you feel the pressure, your ears pop. Why? Because when you're outside of water and you're standing there, that's your normal. That's your normal pressure, the atmospheric pressure. But when you jump down and you go dive down under the bottom of the pool, then pressure starts coming in because that's not your normal environment. You don't function real well. One, you don't function well underwater, but that pressure. So we talk about oppression. It's that type of extra environment that is pushing against them, that person or whatever that is going on. And so it is that. It is used to describe how treatment is harsh, it's not fair, trying to cause some form of sometimes a mental or a physical handicap even. So these are the things that he talks about. And those who oppress, they suffer and they have nobody who can comfort them. Now what I found interesting is the last part of 4 there when he says and on the side of the oppressors was power. So he's using contrast. Those who don't have power, right? He says they have their tears and they have no one to comfort them. But then he says those who have power, guess what they have in common? Neither one of them have true comfort. Now again, this is a world without God. Okay? A world without God, there's no one to really give comfort. He's not talking about hug and say, oh, tell me about your bad day. But there's that sense of relationship of comfort and security. That is what is lacking as we quest after all these things under the sun, that we never end up with comfort. You ever heard the word comfort food? Right? You eat it because it does what? Gives you comfort. And this is the type of thing that you find, but this comfort is with God. And so under the sun without God, neither those who are being oppressed have somebody, nor do those who with power, if there's no God with them. So it gives them that idea. And so this is where we read this last week, these two verses. That's why I say a little bit of an overlap. So when he saw that a world without God, that nobody has this comforter, so he has this kind of profound thought in verse 2. He goes, so I congratulated the dead who are already dead more than the living who are still living. Why would he do that? Because they don't have to worry anymore. There's no more worrying about being oppressed. So it's gone, it's done, it's relief in a way, is what he's saying. And then it's like he steps it up a notch. And then he goes, but better than the both of them is one who never existed, who has never seen the evil activity that is done under the sun. No matter how comforted we are, even as Christians, if we grasp this concept and we live our lives, we're still going to see what? We're going to see evil all around. It doesn't, make us immune from seeing and even witnessing or even if receiving some of the effects of it. But the difference, again, is we would have God to comfort us through those. So this idea is interesting because I've heard people say something like this to the fact that I don't want to bring any children into this world because of the evil that's in it. It's what? It's better that they never live than to experience this. It just kind of hit me this afternoon when I was thinking about it. I remember hearing people, and when I've met couples and stuff, they go, oh, no, we're not going to have kids. Because, man, this world is so messed up and it's so bad, and I just can't imagine bringing somebody in, a young person, and them have to go through and see all the things that are going on. A lot of them, I don't know that I could claim for sure that they're all agnostic or atheistic per se, but a lot are, because they don't see the brighter side of comfort that we get as Christians, that we can provide to our children, to where they can still have a beautiful life and enjoy the pleasures of the world, because we would have the pleasures and coupled with the comfort we're going to receive as God. And hopefully that's what we want to do with our children. If you have no hope like that yourself, why would you want to bring somebody in to go through chasing after the wind, right? And never being satisfied. So that's the evil that he saw, this idea that, all that's going to happen. So I just love the way he kind of said this idea was, I congratulated those who are dead. You made it. You're done. But then I thought, those who haven't even had to be born into this. So that kind of draws a bleak outlook of the world. I tell you, I have to admit myself in a way, the older I get, the faster I'm wanting to get out of here, get off this planet, And you see that in Paul. Paul, said the same thing, the idea that, what, I don't know how long I got, I might die, and if I die, I win. But if I stay here, I continue to serve the Lord. The next thing that he saw from the view from the top is envy. And envy is one of the most destructive things that we see. And so in verse 4, he says, I have seen that every labor and every skill which is done is the result of rivalry between man and his neighbor. This too is vanity and striving after wind. Now, if you read that superficially, you'd look around your neighborhood and you'd go, well, I don't see my neighbors fighting. I don't see them like, but it's more of a subtle psychological thing that is natural, where we do have that. There's this old, and it's really out of date, and I don't know what the new generation, the Gen Zs would say, have a word for it, but we used to call it keeping up with Joneses. And what that meant was, the Joneses lived down the road there, and they got a new car. So I had to keep up with the Jones, so I went and got me a new car. Well, the Joneses built a big patio on the back of their house. So guess what? Hey, that's a nice patio. So I put a patio in my backyard. Keeping up with the Joneses. And we do. Come on. I see you smiling. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Somebody gets a new vehicle and you go sit in it. And that 1995 Ford Taurus that you've been driving around was doing really good, until you sit in your neighbor's brand new vehicle, 2025, and it hit you with that brand new smell, and you see all the gizmo. Oh, and the seats are getting hot, and they cool down too. Look at that. And you push a button, and you can see all around the car and never get out of it. And you're sitting there going, that Taurus is pretty bad. That Taurus is horrible. I owned one, so I know. It was terrible. But I didn't know any better until I got to somebody else's nicer vehicle. And then guess what I wanted? I wanted a bigger car payment. No, I didn't want a bigger car payment. I wanted a better car. And man, I justified everything around except that payment. And I didn't care. Because when I pulled it into my driveway, guess what I was driving? And whether you say it out loud or not, you feel pretty cool about it. Hey, and then guess what? In 2 years, there's a new model. And now it can microwave coffee on the fly and not spill anything, and everything inside it's stain resistant, it cleans itself, it's got vacuum cleaners, and who knows, right? And now yours doesn't have it. That's okay, you'll put up with it for a while, but I guarantee you, give it 5, 8 years. These are facts. And I'm just picking on the automotive industry. Look at our phones. Ooh, that's another one, isn't it? And they know it. Apple 12 out, Apple 7, they had new Android. And it's like, oh, well, my phone folds in half. Do you see this? Guess what I got to go get? God bless the flip phone lovers. Those people that hang on to that, and they love it. I'm like, I do. I'm serious. So it's like, there's something about being satisfied. I tease some of them that have it. You still got a flip phone? But we're in this, it's a rivalry, isn't it? It is, and that's what he says. And so that's what he says. It's this rivalry between man and his neighbor. Who's your neighbor? Well, people in South America are not your neighbor. In the relationship, it's those in the influence of your community. Maybe it is absolutely a neighbor, but a lot of times it's the societal connections that you live in, the new standard, the new things you have. If we were living in Louisiana, it would be boats, right? Because, man, I don't know how many boats I've seen down there. All these boats. Here, not so much, right? Out in the desert. And I see those new boats down there, and I've been down there visiting. They're talking about, yeah, you see old Bobby, he bought this big old big old boat, and they're talking to him, man, it's amazing. It's got 1,000 horsepower and all that. And I'm going, I don't care. Because I look out at the dust in the desert, and I'm like, doesn't mean anything to me, right? But around here, 4-wheel drive. So that's what I mean about when you say neighbor. It's kind of personal. It's the things in which you're seeing on a daily basis. And he says that too is vanity. It's striving after wind. So what do we mean? Vanity? Fleeting. Because next year the new iPhone will come out. Next year a new car will come out. The very one you just bought, it'll have something so much better. And so, again, these are things that from him looking down, we have in us this envy that is very destructive. And it really does. The influence of the inequality, somehow we sense that, maybe we do get into the envy level that's sinful, where, that person doesn't deserve it. Instead of saying, good job, man, that's awesome. I'm glad you got out of that old Taurus, and now you got a brand new vehicle. That's cool. But it still then wants you want one new too. And then there are some that just are bad. They're envious and they're jealous, and as well as the top of that envy is the fool folds his hands and just consumes his own flesh. Solomon contrasts now a person with selfish ambitions to one who isn't striving for anything. This idea of folding the hands, apparently it's a Hebrewic kind of metaphor of sleep, of kind of coma. Nothing. There as well. So he is seen from the top, both those who are in this competition, and then it's almost like he's giving the opposites again, both extremes. One hand is full of rest, is better than two fists of labor, and striving after the wind. Isn't there another common saying we say? So when you hear this, one hand of rest is better than two fists of labor. You might think of more modern. A bird in the hand is worth what? Two in the bush? So what does that mean? The one you got, it's just as good. Because the risk is what? You let go of that one bird to go get those two, and then you got nothing. You got nothing. So the birds you got here, one hand of rest it doesn't have as much equity as two fists of labor. How much value do you gain when your hand is resting or when you're sleeping? Do you get paid by sleeping? Most people get fired, right? If they're sleeping on the job. And so it's kind of that idea that, even though, so in other words, what would be the balance? One hand of rest and one hand of labor. And that's where he says, one hand of rest is still better than two are labor. And he talked about that earlier, this idea of one, and he himself had strived and done all these building projects, and at the end of the night, he couldn't sleep when he went at the end of the day. Because why? He was ate up with anxiety. I got this project, I got to get this done, I got to get this, I got to make sure these guys are paying this bill, So this is again, when you're on the bottom looking up, a lot of times it's easy to go, I want to be up there. Everybody looked at Solomon and thought, oh man, to just live one day as King Solomon, I'd love it. I don't think so. You might enjoy it, but if you saw the behind the curtains and what they were dealing with is kind of this idea. So how do we satisfy ourselves? Well, first and foremost, I think by now, I hope you've seen that it's God, obviously. But a part of that direction, we can see that he says, one, keep your eyes on your own stuff, right? This is one of the things in Exodus 27 when the law was given about the idea, thou shalt not covet. It sounds all, New English and stuff, thou shalt not covet. It's like, well, I don't do that. I don't covet. Do you? And we just talk about the new cars and how you looked over at someone else. Maybe, again, it's not pushing to the level of that sinfulness of covetousness, but boy, it's a fast, quick start to it, isn't it? A desire of wanting what he's got. Now, how I get it, hopefully I do it right and go get my own vehicle and don't kill him to take his, but, it's this idea. Keep your eyes on your own stuff. Keep your attention focused on your family, your life, your work, your possessions. It doesn't mean you can't look and admire and enjoy and see what it is, but you know what? The bird in the hand, what you got is still better. I read a book years ago, and it was called The Grass is Always Greener Under Your Feet. That's the name of the book. I loved it because you said it, usually it's the grass is always greener somewhere else. and this book, this author goes through and goes, no. The grass is always greener under your feet. And that's to me, it hit me when I was studying for this and thinking about that book. I can't even remember the author now, but it's very powerful, isn't it, to realize what you do have. So that leads to the next one is, give thanks for what you have, not what you don't. Be thankful. Before we ask for anything, be mindful. And, I call it taking a careful inventory of what you already have, big or small. Stop for a moment and remember what you do have versus what you're fixing to ask for. And that's why sometimes, whenever we have this idea of what we're asking for, do we really know what we're asking for? Do we know what that is going to be? I mean, as far as, if we got everything that we wanted, we'd probably be miserable. If God answered all our prayers in the affirmative of everything we asked, we would be miserable. And that's why God answers us appropriately. And sometimes we don't get what we want, but we will always get what we need. He will make sure of that. And that's a powerful way of kind of reminding ourselves. And honestly, you'd be amazed at how well off you are. I always say, there's always somebody better off than me, and there's a lot of people a whole lot worse than me. But why do I forget that in the moment of my own self-pity, right? Oh, it's me. Oh, and then I have to catch myself and go, hey, man, I know so many people, yeah, they're a whole lot better off. Why do I always look up? Why am I always looking up, right? We look up and we go, oh, they're so much better. But do you know behind the scenes? Do you really know? Do they have happiness? Have they accomplished it? And maybe you're exactly where the most blessed place you can be, is right where you're at. Again, ask for what you need instead of complaining about what you don't have. And sometimes, I have to admit it, sometimes my asking for stuff is more of complaining when I talk to God. Isn't it? I was thinking that one day, and I thought I could see, I'm on. You dial a phone number, and you get to a place, and they say, push one for this department, push one for this, and I could because I'm left-handed, I do this in my mind. I'm left-handed, but I was thinking one time, I thought, man, if I was to be praying, and I got an answering machine, it said, okay, push one for requests. Boop. Well, I'm going to hit that one, right? Push 2 for complaints. I push 1 for requests. And I start asking, and they say, whoa, you got the wrong department. We're going to transfer you to the complaint department. How many times has that happened to you when you have called an organization to go, oh, I'm sorry, sir or ma'am, you've got the wrong department. Let me put you on transfer to that department. And I thought about this in prayer. I thought, how many times the Lord could have said, Ron, wrong department. You're not making a request, you're making a complaint. And so we have to really inventory, ourselves. And this is where, it's interesting because we just started the book of James on Sunday morning, right? So we're going to get a little bit of it ahead of my lessons on Sunday morning. But look what he says about the conflict and the turmoil that's created in James 4, verses 1 and 2. He says, what is the source of quarrels and conflicts among you? Is it not the source of your pleasures that are wage war in your members? You lust, you do not have, so you commit murder. You are envious, and you cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You do not have because you do not ask. And man, this could have been extracted and dropped right over into Ecclesiastes. The idea, we have an abundant, beautiful life, what we do have. And again, if we don't have God as our focus, then it's grasping after the wind, and it is miserable. In verse 3 of James, the very next verse, he says, you ask, you do not receive because you ask with the wrong motives, so that you may spend it on what? Your pleasures. Are pleasures selfish or selfless? They're selfish. Unless you're really altruistic and you get so much pleasure on everything you do for others, then you're a very unique person. Most of the time, now you do get pleasure from helping others, don't get me wrong, but you know what I mean. A lot of times, most of what we're asking, if we're asking for things that are spinning for pleasure, A lot of times it's because it's personal. It's something that I can enjoy. And so he says, why are you not getting it? You got the wrong motive. So it fits exactly. The third one and the last one is this disillusionment. This idea that, kind of when he looks down, so in verses 7 and 8, he goes, then I looked again at vanity under the sun. There was a certain man without a dependent, having neither son nor brother. Yet there was no end to all his labor. Indeed, his eyes were not satisfied with riches, and he never asked, for whom am I laboring and depriving myself of pleasure? This too is vanity, and it is a grievous task. So he looks around at a man who's been working so hard and comes to a point in his life, and it's like, what have I done all this for? What have I accomplished? And that's a part of, I think, when we look at being created in the image of God, God created us to be creators, to create. And that's why we love children, little babies, and until they turn into teenagers, But, we love the idea of having children. Most people do. Not all, but it's in us because that's a part what God desired. Through his love, he created us. And he wanted a family. And you have God Father, God Son, God Spirit, a family. And they created us, and he said, go do what? Procreate. Go populate this beautiful world I gave you. Create, and take over my creation. And so when we strive after that, what's the end of it? And a part of that is, the beauty is to pass it on to a legacy. And, be able to have that impression. A lot of times people look around at the end of their lives and, are you going to be remembered by who and for what? Well, he was a hard worker. He was there every day. Where's his family? Doesn't have any. But he was a hard worker. Well, and yet he says, all of that he accomplished, his eyes weren't satisfied with the riches. But the problem is, he says, he never asked. He never asked that important question. While he's striving to the top, and this happens many times to Christian fathers and Christian even mothers who are pursuing after a career, which in itself, there's nothing wrong with it, but too often you leave your family in the sidelines. And your focus becomes your career and your job. And this guy here, he's gone through all this, but he never envisioned that he would have that desire to say, well, who am I doing this for? They become so blinded. And I think it's because without God, you're like that junkie, you get one hit, you got to double that hit, and you got to triple that hit, and you got to keep going. And so you forget about all the things around you. You even get to the point where you don't even notice people noticing it. When you first start out, you're very concerned because you're looking at, do they know I'm drunk or high or whatever's going on? But eventually, you get so focused, and it's careers like that. Careers can be an addictive drug like that. And then we forget to stop and ask, what's important? Family. He deprived himself of all that. And a lot of times, even just pleasure. I've seen people that, and now that I'm at that, I've got a lot more friends that are retired. It's like, I was just joking with a friend of mine, and I said, so what are you going to do? Leave all your retirement and your stuff to your kids? I was teasing about buying a leaf blower for a backpack because he's always out there raking. I go, what are you doing? Dude, as many leaves as you rake, get you one of those Echo backpack leaf blowers. I said, are you telling me you can't? Wow, yeah. I just brought it up. I go, you can leave all that money to who? What are they going to do with it? It's kind of an Ecclesiastes statement, right? So enjoy a little bit. I'm not saying don't take care of them, but at the same time, the Lord wants us to be that. So one of the overall themes in here, as we summarize some of this, is that one, power corrupts, and power corrupts absolutely. That was a saying by Lord Aiken. He was a British historian years ago, said power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And we see that. We see that a lot of times. In a way that it corrupts is the drive for it. Because our path, as we start out shoveling the manure like I was describing, I want power. That's really what I'm after, because my boss, Don, he had power. And then we want more, and we want more. So there's a level of that in our own lives. In seeking more of that, we don't realize the burden and the strain that comes with it. And then sometimes we just don't see what it has done to our own personal lives as we go through it. The second thing is the best success, honestly, is just be content where you're at. Look down and remember the grass is the best under your feet. It's there. It's right under your own feet. We see this all the time as well, where we think somehow if I could just get, a $20 an hour raise, life would be so beautiful. And everybody I know, there's a few that haven't, but most of the people, I guess, that I hang out with anyway, live in the real world, they make that $20 more an hour, and guess what? They got rid of that Taurus, bought them a Ford truck, and now they got a $700 payment, and guess what? That $10 an hour went to. They're back at what? Man, if I could just make $10 more an hour now. So success is being content. And that helps you sleep better at nights too. And then when it comes your way, awesome. And if it doesn't, awesome. It's okay. If it's meant to be, as they say, meant to be, right? There's a part that fast-paced society and competitive spirit, it's not wrong necessarily either, though. Life often at the top is very lonely. The higher you go up. When I went in the military as an enlisted guy, I was just a common Joe, man. I was a private among a lot of people, man. I was just a guy in green. But when I went to OCS and I became an officer, they wouldn't talk to me anymore. Yes, sir. No, sir. And then whenever we went out on maneuvers, I was the only lieutenant and I had 25 enlisted, and it was lonely because I didn't get to hang out with a bunch of lieutenants that were mine. It became that way. And then they looked at me and said, well, you're in charge. I couldn't wait to become an officer. I was like, oh yeah, oh boy, right? Become an officer, get more pay, and they're going to salute me and all that. Next thing I know, man, the responsibility, and then it isolated me, set me apart. That's what happens with middle managers, new supervisors, right? You want it, and then it starts to isolate you. It starts to put you apart. So, but I also want us to understand, competition is useful to produce excellence. And again, let's not blur what I'm saying, because everything we are saying here is in the context of a life in this world without God. Chasing after all these things without God. You're going to have these problems, and you're going to have those views the way that he had. There were many, and there are many very righteous people in positions of power. And I know a lot. Doctors, lawyers, they're in positions of power, and I don't know what's on the other side of their curtain, but you can still do it. But the competition is healthy. I always believe that. It pushes you, doesn't it? It helps you. That's why I always need somebody to work out with. It pushes me. Because, man, he just did another. He's walking faster. Now I'm walking faster. And that friend of mine, I tell you, we ride together, and we go, let's just take an easy ride. We get done, and I go, why are you going so fast? He goes, well, you were going so fast. I said, no, I wasn't. I was keeping up with you. You kept going faster. Competition makes us better. Isn't it? So there is that. Understand as well, I think that power is powerful and it's beautiful if it's used to help those who are powerless. And that's something that I felt like as a leader, I had a responsibility to the people who were under me, was it to take care of them. We used to have this thing when I went through officer training, mission or men, which is first? And it used to be, well, the mission first. The men, don't worry about them. I never could buy that. I never had that philosophy. I was always about the men. And I know it sounds altruistic, but the reason was, my philosophy was, if I take care of the men, they'll do the mission every time, right? And if I go in there and I say, hey guys, we're going to charge that hill. I know there's 600 guys up there with machine guns. But you know what? We're going to take that hill. If I've been taking care of the men, they'd have the confidence, and but taken care of. But that's the idea, that's the corruption that Solomon was seeing, is that people who had positions where they could have been helping, they were taking advantage of it. Wealth is a stewardship from God. Whatever we have, it's something we should take care of and we should be blessed with and use. And so that's another thing we see as we're journeying through here. So when we look at real applications, how we make that for us is, one, aim for contentment. Watch yourself on a daily basis. As we get up in the morning and we start to get a little grumbly, we'll stop and really think, what specifically is it that's causing this? Because you might be able to drill it back to a rivalry or desire that is why you're upset with someone at work or something. I don't know what it is. But a lot of times our ulterior motives that are deep-rooted, that we are not even consciously thinking about, are absolutely being manifested in the way that we interact with the world. And so we need to learn to be content. This is another part that is a sermon in itself to the world, isn't it? Because there's not a lot of content people around. Content people are happy people. They're the people you want to be around. And then you find out because they're content. And mainly because we have God in our lives, it completes our contentment, right? And so that as well is what we see. Strive to be useful in whatever level you're at, wherever you're at. You notice these are not for self. The contentment is, but what we will find as it manifests is that we'll strive to be useful for others as well. And work at being faithful. It's a journey. It's not a perfection thing that we're going to accomplish. We understand that. All right. That's the class for tonight. Next week, we'll look at Lesson 7. So if you got any closing comments or thoughts? Nope. All right. Well, we hope you can make it next week to this great study. I'm enjoying it. Ecclesiastes. Sunday morning, 9:45, we're studying the Gospel of Mark. We're going through the book of James Sunday morning, and Sunday afternoon, we're looking at the prophet Isaiah. So until we see you, God bless.